Level 1. The dishwasher. Your hands are in ice water. Again. Between orders, you cool burns you don't have time to notice. Behind you, the ticket rail prints. It never stops. It does not know your name. It does not need to. You are the kitchen porter. In French, plongeur. Nobody calls you that either. They call you, hey. You scrub pans that held food you will never taste, plated for people you will never see. 3 feet of counter, 1 deep sink. 14 hours most nights. In the United States, a dishwasher earns around $15 an hour. Some nights, less, once the tip pool clears. At the very top of this same hierarchy, a celebrity chef is worth $220 million. Do the math once. Then stop. It does not help you finish the shift. You did not choose this system. Nobody in this kitchen did. It was built by a soldier. Auguste Escoffier spent nearly 7 years as an army chef during the Franco-Prussian War. He watched command structures move men efficiently through chaos. Then he brought that structure into a kitchen at the Savoy Hotel, London. And it never left. Escoffier wrote it all down in 1903, in a single book, over 5,000 recipes, arranged by station, over 20 defined roles reporting up a strict chain of command. It is still, in translation, sold to culinary students today. Every station, every rank, every yes chef. That is a military chain of command, wearing an apron. You are standing at the bottom of it. Nobody tells you that when you're hired. You find out the first time you're blamed for a smudge on a plate you never touched. The floor here is always wet. The mats are worn through in the same 4 spots every kitchen wears them through. You get maybe 30 seconds between tickets to make sure a burn doesn't turn into something worse. There is a reason food service has the highest rate of substance use disorder of any industry measured in the United States. Nearly 17%, according to federal health researchers. You start to understand why by week 3. You are invisible here. That is not an accident. It is the design. The system does not need you to be seen. It needs you to be replaceable. But there is a way up. It starts with a word that sounds almost respectable. Stage. It is not a job. It is an audition that does not pay. You are about to find out exactly how long an audition can last. Level 2. The Commis chef. You have not been paid in a month. They call it a stage, from the French word for trainee. You call it what it is. Free labor, dressed up as tradition. This is not one restaurant's shortcut. It is common enough to have a name across the entire industry. In 2017, the U.S. Department of Labor investigated a celebrated restaurant on Lummi Island, Washington, one of the best reviewed in the country. Investigators found kitchen staff worked a full month unpaid as stages, then were moved on to a day rate of $50 for shifts up to 14 hours, with no overtime. The restaurant paid 19 workers a settlement of $149,624. That wasn't the end of the bill either. A separate class action lawsuit over the same practices eventually cost the restaurant another $600,000, and later over $1 million more once every claim was settled. That is what it costs once to get caught. Most of the time, nobody does. You rotate stations. You learn knife work under correction that never stops. A cut too thick. A dice too uneven. Redo it. Nobody explains why. You are expected to already understand why. The pain is supposedly the point. That is what everyone above you insists. It is called paying your dues. Nobody above you remembers exactly what those dues bought them. Your hands develop calluses in places that did not have skin before. You start recognizing other cooks by their burn scars instead of their faces. You call your family on Sundays and tell them it's going well. You don't mention the burns. You don't mention eating family meal leftovers standing up at the walk-in door, because sitting down would mean admitting how tired you actually are. There is a rank below you, the dishwasher, and for the first time you understand why they never speak. Speaking here means being noticed. Being noticed here means being corrected. Some nights you consider leaving. You don't, because leaving now would mean the unpaid month bought you nothing at all. That, more than any wage, is what keeps a stage standing in this kitchen. If you survive this, and many do not, you are given something almost nobody explains properly. A station of your own. It sounds like freedom. What it actually is, you're about to find out. Level 3. Demi chef de partie. A pan of hot risotto sails across the kitchen. It lands, still steaming, against a teenage cook's chest. Nobody stops working. The ticket rail keeps printing. That happened to a young Mario Batani, according to multiple accounts from chefs who trained under Marco Pierre White, the same chef who, at 33, became the youngest person and the first Briton ever to hold 3 Michelin stars. White has said he never liked raising his voice. People who worked under him remember it differently. One of them, a young Gordon Ramsay, has spoken publicly about being reduced to tears in that same kitchen. You are not being trained to cook. Not yet. Not really. You are being trained to survive correction. Enough skill to run a station alone for a shift. Not enough standing to ever push back. Your knuckles carry 3 different burns this week alone. You stopped counting after the first one. The lesson underneath the lesson. Pain, delivered by someone above you, is how skill gets transferred down. Nobody calls it that. Everyone participates in it anyway. You watch a chef de partie scream at a commis over a wilted garnish. You recognize the tone. It is the same one used on you last month. It will be the same one you use, eventually, on somebody else. This is not a rumor confined to one kitchen or one decade. It runs through the whole system, generation after generation, station after station. The person who threw that pan once stood exactly where you are standing now. The person who caught it built a kitchen of his own years later that looked remarkably similar. You tell yourself it will be different when you're in charge. Almost everyone tells themselves that. For now, there is a dice to finish, a sauce that is breaking, and a voice behind you already counting down. The next rank does not remove the pressure. It only changes its shape and hands you a station wide enough to hide inside or drown in. Level 4. Chef de partie. Your station has a French name now. Saucier, Poissonnier, Garde-manger, Pâtissier. Nobody uses your own name during service anymore. Only the stations. You have become a function instead of a person, and for the first time, it feels almost like an achievement. You control everything at your corner of the line. 40, 60, 90 plates in 90 minutes, each one identical to the last, none of them allowed to be. One order comes back wrong. You redo it without a word. There is no time for words. This is the busiest rank in the whole hierarchy. Not the highest paid, the busiest. Your body will not fully recover from years at this station. Most bodies don't. Backs, knees, wrists. The wear is cumulative, and nobody schedules time off to let it heal. It is also, according to one of the most widely read memoirs ever written about professional kitchens, the rank most associated with the industry's darkest habits. Anthony Bourdain, describing line cooks of his own era, wrote that they were whacked-out moral degenerates, dope fiends, a thuggish assortment of drunks, sneak thieves, sluts, and psychopaths. And added, "You wouldn't be too far off base." He was writing about people working exactly the station you are working now. The reasons were never a mystery. Late nights, easy access to alcohol after close, physical pain that never fully resolves, a culture that treats exhaustion as a badge, not a warning sign. Food service workers across the American industry report the highest rate of substance use disorder of any profession measured by federal researchers. The same statistic that followed you up from the sink. You are standing inside it now, not reading about it. Nobody above you asks if you're all right. The only question here is, are you on time? There is one way out of this rank that doesn't involve burning out completely. Get promoted. More authority. Fewer plates you personally touch. More people who report to you instead. It sounds like relief. It is really just a transfer from carrying the weight yourself to being blamed for the weight other people carry. Level 5. Senior Chef de Partie. You run the heaviest station in the kitchen, now the one the sous chef leans on hardest when service goes sideways. You still need permission to change a single element on a plate. Authority, in this hierarchy, arrives in very small doses. Here is something the recipe books rarely mention. For most of the 20th century, a cook standing exactly where you are standing, same skill, same hours, same scars, was, if she was a woman, routinely kept out of this kitchen altogether. Historically, women were excluded from professional brigades, largely on the argument that they lacked the temperament, the stamina, or the authority to run a real station. When hotels did hire women, they were frequently placed in a separate kitchen entirely, cooking home-style food, away from the brigade proper, under a different set of rules and a different ceiling. The talent was never the deciding factor. The rule was. In 1906, one industry publication laid the reasoning out like a spec sheet. Women lacked accuracy with flavorings, the right temperament, the stamina to stand the strain, the discipline to manage a station, the patience to keep it orderly. Not one of those claims was ever tested. They were simply printed, repeated, and treated as settled fact until they became policy. You think about this the next time a colleague, more talented than you, is quietly passed over for the next promotion. Not because of a mistake, because of a pattern that started before either of you were born and never fully ended. The ticket rail does not care about any of this. It keeps printing through every shift change, every injustice, every promotion given or withheld. It has no memory. It only has now. You keep your head down. You run your station. You wait. Somewhere above you, decisions are being made about who gets to keep climbing, decisions made in a language of tradition that has never once had to explain itself to the people it excludes. That will natter later. Right now, there's a ticket up and a pan already starting to smoke. Level 6. Sous chef. Your title translates literally to underchef, second in command. The job description is simpler than the title. Absorb. When something goes wrong 2 stations down, it reaches you before it reaches anyone above you. You didn't make the mistake. You will still be the one explaining it. You run the floor when the head chef isn't there, which, at a certain level of ambition, is most nights. You enforce standards you didn't set, for reasons you're rarely given, onto people you were not long ago, standing shoulder to shoulder with. This rank asks something specific of you. Administer pressure downward, absorb pressure from above, and don't let either side see how much it costs you. It is not unique to badly run kitchens. It happens in celebrated ones too. In 2022, a Financial Times investigation found that Noma, a restaurant repeatedly named the best in the world, was running its kitchen with roughly 30 unpaid interns, working alongside 34 paid chefs, some logging up to 70 hours a week. The restaurant only began paying its interns after the investigation went public, a change that reportedly added $50,000 to $70,000 a month to its labor costs. Noma had, by then, been named the best restaurant in the world multiple times over. None of those rankings ever measured what was happening to the people actually cooking the food. If the most decorated kitchen on the planet was built in part on unpaid labor at the bottom, it tells you something about every rank between that bottom and the top. The system does not correct itself. It gets caught or it doesn't. You start to notice something else too. The people most likely to defend this structure are rarely the people at the very top. They are people exactly at your level, close enough to remember the pain, high enough to have a reason to justify it. That is complicity. Nobody says that word out loud in a kitchen. The ticket rail keeps printing anyway, indifferent to what you just realized about your own role in all of this. There is a version of you that could refuse to enforce this. It would likely end your career at this restaurant. Tonight. Most people, reasonably, do not choose that version. You don't either. Level 7. Head Chef. You write the menu now. Every dish on it reflects your judgment, your training, years of your own hands in other people's kitchens. You almost never cook any of it yourself. Your job, at this rank, is architecture. Hiring, training, costing, timing, holding an entire operation together during the 90 loudest minutes of any given night without touching a pan, unless something has already gone wrong. You have more authority than anyone below you, and less freedom than you expected to have. There is no one left in this building to blame upward, except the person who owns it. Isolation begins here, quietly. You eat standing up, alone, between service windows. The people who work for you are not quite your friends anymore. You decide their schedules, their pay, their futures. Friendship rarely survives that kind of asymmetry cleanly. 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours in a single week are not unusual at this rank, logged quietly, because overtime protections rarely reach this high up the ladder. You tell yourself it is temporary. Chefs have been telling themselves that for over a century. This is also where the abuse cycle either breaks or repeats. Chefs who came up through kitchens like Marco Pierre White's, screamed at, humiliated, occasionally struck with cookware, do not uniformly reject that model once they're in charge. Some recreate it, station for station, on the people now beneath them. It is not universal. It is common enough that the industry has quietly named the pattern, even if no restaurant puts it on the org chart. You tell yourself your kitchen will be different. It might be. That is entirely up to you now, in a way it never was before. Above you sits a rank you can almost touch. The person whose name is actually attached to the building or the brand. Either way, the rules you enforce are still, ultimately, somebody else's rules, set by a market, a guide, a reputation you don't fully control. The kitchen taught you to give orders. It is about to teach you that giving orders was never the same thing as being free. Level 8. Executive Chef. Your name is now attached to more than one kitchen at once. You set the standard. Someone else executes it, in a room you are not standing in, at a time you cannot see. If a dish goes out wrong in a restaurant 300 miles away, it is still your name in the review. This is the rank where success starts to resemble exposure more than comfort. You manage cost, brand, supplier relationships, hiring across multiple locations. Everything except the one thing that got you here: actually cooking. There is a number worth sitting with at this rank. A 2025 study, published in the Strategic Management Journal, examined Michelin-starred restaurants in New York City between 2000 and 2019. It found that more than 40% of the restaurants that had earned a Michelin star had closed by the end of that period, compared to roughly 20% of similarly rated restaurants without one. Landlords raise rent. Suppliers raise prices. Staff expect higher wages. Diners expect more than any kitchen can consistently deliver. Forever. The star does not guarantee survival. In this data, it correlates with the opposite. You already sense this, even without reading the study. Every lease renewal feels different once a critic's rating enters the room. Every supplier now knows exactly how much leverage they have over you. This is the paradox that will define the rest of the climb. The more recognition you accumulate, the more precarious your position actually becomes. Recognition invites scrutiny. Scrutiny invites cost. Cost, eventually, invites collapse for restaurants that look, from the outside, like the ones that made it. You have colleagues who reached exactly this rank and lost everything within 5 years of their biggest award. Nobody warns you about this at the bottom of the hierarchy. There isn't time, and there's no incentive to. You start weighing every decision against a scorecard you've never seen and can't appeal. Menus get more expensive to justify. Dining rooms get smaller, so every table can be perfect. The margin for error shrinks, precisely when the pressure to be flawless grows. The tier above you is the one every culinary career is quietly built toward. It comes with a rating system run by people you will never meet, who will decide, without explanation, whether everything you've built survives the year. Level 9. Michelin-starred chef owner. Somewhere in your dining room tonight, a stranger is eating alone. They pay full price. They tip normally. They say nothing unusual on the way out. 3 months from now, you may learn that visit quietly decided your restaurant's entire year. The guide that stranger works for didn't start as a restaurant authority at all. In 1900, 2 tire manufacturers gave away a 400-page book to French motorists, meant to get people driving farther so their tires would wear out sooner. The star ratings came later, in 1926. The power the stars now hold came later still, and it never once belonged to anyone in this kitchen. Michelin inspectors eat more than 250 anonymous meals a year. They spend around 160 nights in hotels, complete roughly 600 visits, and file over 1,000 reports, all to produce one guide. They pay for every meal themselves to protect their independence. They are instructed never to reveal what they do for a living. Not to colleagues, not to extended family. According to Michelin's own accounts, not even to their parents. You will never know their faces. You will never get direct feedback. You will only ever see the result. A star awarded, kept, or quietly taken away. This uncertainty has a body count. Bernard Loiseau held 3 Michelin stars. He told a journalist before his death that he would kill himself if he ever lost one. In February 2003, after a rival guide downgraded his restaurant and rumors circulated that Michelin was preparing to remove a star, Loiseau died by suicide, hours after presiding over lunch service. Reporting on his death describes more than one contributing factor: financial pressure, a history of depression. But multiple accounts name the fear of losing his rating as a central weight in his final months. You reach this rank believing it is the top of a fair system. Sufficient talent, sufficient stars, sufficient recognition, measured the same way for everyone. It is not entirely fair. It never was. In 1933, a chef named Eugenie Brazier became the first person in history to hold 6 Michelin stars, 3 at each of 2 restaurants she ran in Lyon. No one matched that achievement for 65 years. In 1998, when Alain Ducasse reached 6 stars, the New York Times described him as the first chef ever to do so. Brazier's record, set 65 years earlier, at the exact rank you are standing in right now, had simply been left out of the story. Food historians have since corrected the record. For decades, most of the public never heard it corrected at all. This is the rank that is supposed to mean you made it. Objectively. Measurably. Beyond dispute. And still, the system decided, for 65 years, whose achievement counted enough to be remembered. You made it to the summit almost everyone recognizes. There is one tier left above it, not higher in stars, but higher in exposure. And exposure, at this altitude, does not feel like winning. Level 10. Global Celebrity Chef. Restaurants carrying your name now exist on multiple continents. Television deals, cookbooks, a media company with your face as its logo. There is no ticket rail here anymore. There is something louder, a feed that never stops printing your name in real time, whether you asked for it or not. You are, by any measure available to this hierarchy, at the top. You are also, by that same measure, the most watched, most exposed, least private person in the entire system. Every kitchen you have ever worked in, every rank you climbed through to get here, is now part of a public biography strangers quote back to you. In March 2026, René Redzepi, chef and co-owner of Noma, a restaurant named the best in the world multiple times over the previous 2 decades, resigned from the company following a New York Times investigation. The Times interviewed 35 former employees. According to their accounts, Redzepi punched staff, slammed them into walls, and threatened to have their families deported. Sponsors withdrew funding from a planned residency within days of publication. Redzepi has said an apology is not enough, and that he takes responsibility for his own actions. This is not a story about one man. It is the top rank of the exact hierarchy you have been climbing since the sink. The brigade was built over a century ago to end chaos through strict, top-down command. At its most decorated peak, in one of its most celebrated kitchens, that command allegedly turned into physical abuse of the people with the least power to refuse it. 35 of them, according to their own accounts to reporters. You began this system scrubbing pans, invisible, replaceable, judged only by whether the plates came out clean. You end it, if you climb far enough, visible to millions, judged by everyone, protected by no one, not even, it turns out, by the very top. You never met the dishwasher who trained you, back at the very beginning. He never saw what you became. Somewhere below you tonight, someone's hands are back in ice water, listening to a rail that never stops printing. The brigade taught you to fear command. The stars taught you to fear judgment. Underneath both of those fears is the same one: being watched by someone who never has to introduce themselves. Neither of you is free. The cycle continues. A stranger sits alone at a table tonight. They eat. They pay in full. They leave without a word. 3 months from now, that one meal may decide whether this restaurant survives the year. This is a kitchen brigade, a chain of command copied, almost word for word, from a 19th century army. 10 ranks stand between the sink and the spotlight. The person at the very top and the person scrubbing pans at the very bottom are afraid of the exact same thing: being judged by someone who never introduces themselves. By the end, you'll understand why the safest rank in this system might be the one